So, hi everybody, you're very welcome to the third of 6 seminars in our current Connected Tech seminar series, which is focusing on emerging technologies. They're running each Friday at 3 p.m. And this series is part of our wider Connected Seminar series, which we invite experts to discuss with us the key trends and the key challenges that are facing business and wider society. And today, we're delighted to be joined by Lory Kehoe, Assistant Professor at Trinity College and Director of Digital Assets and Blockchain at BNY Mellon. Lory has published extensively across Irish media in the area of blockchain and fintech, and is also a founding member of Blockchain Ireland, the national blockchain initiative. So we're very grateful that you've joined us this evening, Lory, and we're really looking forward to hearing your insights on blockchain and digital assets.
Fantastic, Dr. Sweeney. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you, and great to meet the rest of the group, and looking forward to the conversation and all the questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of them.
Great, thanks. So we have gathered a series of questions, and I will just encourage participants as well to pop any questions that you have into the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that. But to begin with, I suppose I'm conscious that we have a broad audience here this evening, and some will probably have more knowledge and experience of blockchain than others. So could I maybe first ask you to explain what is blockchain and kind of how does this technology work?
Sure. Okay. And there's a few ways to look at this. And the first thing that I'd say is when people hear about Bitcoin and blockchain, and I feel like they kind of come up to me and they kind of say, look, I don't really get this whole thing. And in a lot of ways, there isn't a huge amount to get, right? And what do I mean by that? We have the internet, we do stuff on the internet, that makes sense to us, that creates value for us, that creates businesses. But we don't know how it works, or the vast majority of us don't know how it works. Similarly with electricity, there's value from it, we use it, but a lot of people don't know how electricity works. So blockchain is a funny thing, which is great, by the way, right? A lot of people are very interested in how it works. But really the main thing is, what is the value that it creates? So never lose sight of that. That's probably kind of point one. Point two, the way I would describe what blockchain is very crudely is that it is actually at its core a database. So we can't get more, I guess, unsexy depending on, I guess, your opinion, but ultimately it's a database, it's a shared database. And that is ultimately what it is. So I have a copy of the data set, but Lorraine, so do you, and so does everybody else in this call. So it isn't a centralized database where I own and manage and control all the data and keep my arms around it. We all have an exact copy, exact instance of it. So if you think about it almost for a second, it's as if we were all working together on an office floor. It's as if there's a ledger in the middle of the room and we are recording information into that ledger, which we all have access to. But then it goes to a step further where actually we're all holding the pen simultaneously. So we all must, I guess, agree to every transaction that gets recorded. So if there's 50 people on this call, 50 of us are holding the pen, so we all have to agree, yes, Lory has done this, now he owns this, and Lorraine sent it to him at this date at that time, blah, blah, blah. And that's what gets recorded. Everybody says yes, it gets added, and we move on to the next transaction, and so on, so on, so on, so on. So that's really at its core what it is, a shared ledger with some unique characteristics. The third point that I'd say really is that there are some unique characteristics with it, right? So, and let me explain what they are. So I think there are probably 4 key characteristics. Now, where the applications of blockchain make sense is where you start to tick off more of these characteristics and attributes. And it really, if you're only ticking one of them, for me, it is, it's maybe not that powerful a use case, and you could probably use another technology which will be cheaper, better, faster than blockchain. So it's definitely, I guess, blockchain is not always the answer, is probably an important subtext. But going through those 4 characteristics, because I'm conscious of this being the longest intro ever. So one, key feature that you hear a lot about is immutability. So immutability is a term which is kind of, blockchain landers of this kind of new language, but fancy way of saying hard or very hard to edit, amend, or alter something. That's ultimately what it is. So when you record a transaction on a blockchain, especially a very decentralized, or if you record something on a blockchain where there are lots and lots of people involved in that blockchain, like 50 people here, for example, it's very hard to edit or amend or alter something, because basically I would have to get agreement from over half this group that that transaction or what I'm trying to do is legit. So if I try and do it on my own, my data set won't sync with everybody else's. And basically, I could be trying to pull a fast one, and you go, "Hey, Laura, you don't have that money, or that transaction is not valid," and that basically it won't get added to the shared ledger. And I may even get kicked out of the group for trying to pull a fast one. So that's kind of immutability is a key feature. Now, what that results in is robust data, a very good audit trail, and also what it can lead to is use cases around supply chain management, authenticity of goods. So for example, we look at LVMH or Louis Vuitton actually are using blockchain in order to record how handbags are made, believe it or not. So the farms in Italy where leather is coming from, how that leather is then transported, how it's actually put together. So if you're spending €5,000 on a handbag in Brown Thomas, you scan the QR code, it opens up a web page, and then you punch in the serial number on the bag to effectively do two-factor authentication, and then it shows that the bag is legit. And this is a way to counteract counterfeit goods, which is a big problem for those luxury manufacturers. And what's interesting here is, I guess, if you talk about digital transformation, which is kind of sitting under, really what you're seeing there is LVMH have created a platform in association with Microsoft called Aura, and that is that blockchain platform. And then if you start to look a little further, they're now looking at white labeling their technology to other fashion houses. So it's an example of LVMH acting like a tech company rather than a fashion company, which I think is a pretty interesting play on where the world is right now and folks really understanding the power of technology and what it can do. So back to the start, immutability, hard to edit, amend, or alter. Right, number two, second characteristic, smart contracts. Another buzzword, smart contracts are self-executing contracts when certain criteria are met. If this event happens, trigger this payment. So what does that mean? Or give me an example. Okay, so today, if you buy travel insurance, your flight's delayed more than, let's say, 4 hours, you're actually entitled to make a claim, but you will be driven to go online, fill out a form, and then you get some of your money back minus the excess a couple of weeks later. That's not a fantastic experience. Okay, you've had a bad experience, you got to do homework, and then you don't get all your money back and it takes weeks. Like, I'd argue that there are many I guess moments of truth if you're doing customer journey mapping in that process, and those moments of truth aren't good. So how do we use technology to make that a better process? And a way to do that is we kind of think of what consumers expect nowadays, which is free, perfect, and now in terms of platforms. And so free can be challenging, but certainly perfect and now from a customer experience perspective can be provided. So if your flight's delayed more than 4 hours, effectively smart contracts are executed, they link up with flight trackers, and payments are made automatically to your bank account. You don't have to fill in any forms, and you get the money instantly. And that's actually something which AXA has built. It's a product called Fizzy. So this isn't, I guess, talking about too much stuff in the future, but this is happening now. Okay, that's number two. Number three, we talk about decentralization. And decentralization is kind of a concept I mentioned a minute ago. So instead of one entity having all the data and taking control and ownership, it's spread. So I have a copy, so does Katrina, so does David, so does William, so does Teddy, so does everybody on this call. Everyone has a copy of that. And that is a big feature of blockchain technology. It is distributed or distributed ledger technology or shared ledger. And that's where the name comes from. It is spread. So not one entity owns everything. And the more decentralized it is, the more powerful it is because it's harder to hack. Because basically, if you have a group of, let's say, 5 people that are running a blockchain, you need 3 of those folks to come together to basically say, hey, this is actually the truth. And they can overpower the network based on that majority. Whilst the bigger the number that becomes, it becomes harder and harder for groups of entities to come together to try and overpower 50% of the network, or what's called a 51% attack. So there's actually strength in numbers. So that's an important piece to note. So that's what really decentralization is all about. It also has a thing called automated redundancy. And automated redundancy effectively means that there's backups built in. So because it's decentralized, if something happens to my data set, I can refer to Lorraine's or Colin's or whomever's. And that's it. So that's what decentralized is. And I think if we look at the Bank of England, they're looking at blockchain technology as a form of record keeping for the financial system in the UK. And Governor Andrew Bailey and Mark Carney are folks who are looking at this. So again, there's kind of proof points and data points, and it's not just me making up kind of crazy stuff. The fourth point I'd say is in relation to cryptography. And cryptography, right, what we're talking about here is, and I'll get more into this a little bit later, but how does blockchain work is really the key thing. And long story short, a protocol, the Bitcoin blockchain, was written in 2009. And in that was basically the blockchain. You can't explain Bitcoin without blockchain. And basically a block is created, or the Genesis block is the first block. Transactions take place. They're then validated through the process, through an agreed process as to how that specific blockchain works. And then basically those transactions are uploaded, for want of a better term, to that blockchain. Then the second block is created and the same process continues. And block 22, then block 500, block 1000, it works all the way up. And the cryptography component is very interesting, and that is that block 1000 has a unique identifier, and that is linked to block 999, and 999 is linked to 998. So if you want to make a change, or to say that you've done something or that you haven't done something, you can't go into one specific block and change one transaction, because it changes the unique identifier of that block, which then won't sync up with the previous block or the block after. So what you actually have to do is go back to the first block and change the entire sequence. You are also up against a clock of approximately 10 minutes in order to do that. And at the moment, there's probably, I think there's about 709,000 blocks have been created on the Bitcoin blockchain. So you have to go back to 700 or through 709,000 blocks and then overpower the network. Not only is that extremely difficult, but you need state level energy access in order to overpower the network in that way. So it's incredibly difficult, and it hasn't happened in 12 years. So important facts. Anyway, and again, bringing it all back. So point one, blockchain is interesting, but it's about the use cases. Point two, it is a shared ledger. And point three, there are unique characteristics. If you're thinking about applications and use cases, try to tick off those four. So we mentioned immutability, we mentioned smart contracts, we mentioned decentralization, and we mentioned, I guess, cryptography. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a window into the magical world of blockchain technology.
Yeah, that's great. That was a really good overview. Thanks for that, Lory. And as you mentioned, the supply chain, and particularly around counterfeit goods, we had an interesting question around climate change, and if blockchain can kind of support the fight against around climate change, and in particular, I suppose, tracking the carbon footprint along the supply chain.
A good question. And the answer is it can, okay? And the way I look at this is blockchain can be used to record anything. And I'm not here to kind of shoot down blockchain, obviously, right? It's my job and career. But I think the reason, I think the angle I would be saying is, how is recording, I guess, carbon related data better if it's on a blockchain than on another system? And it's important to ask that question and trying to figure out what are the other options available, and where and why does blockchain make the most sense, right? I think, you know, one theory might be that what you want to be able to do is ensure that as carbon is emitted, that level of carbon is recorded and recorded accurately, and it is not easily edited, amended, or altered, right? And that goes back to one of the key features that we mentioned, immutability. And I think therefore that's a good application. But there could be other technologies, arguably, that, you know, may play that role pretty well as well. So I don't want to say that it's always the go-to technology for that kind of function. But I guess if you look at the Financial Times, if you look at The Economist, what they call blockchain technology is the trust machine or the truth machine, because of that layer of information. So I think for things like that, I think it's I think it's definitely a technology that should be explored and evaluated alongside other technologies to see what are the pros and cons.
Yeah, great. And just as you talk about blockchain and its potential, can I ask you how impactful or disruptive is blockchain now, and kind of what are the forecasts kind of going forward?
Okay, good question. How impactful? And again, I'm biased, so I'm going to say very impactful. But I think there's some people who are part of this course and part of the MBA course. I know Lorraine Dunbar, I think, is maybe in the next group. I think I told her maybe 5 years ago or more that blockchain would be everywhere by 2020. I was wrong. It may take another 5 years. It may even take another 10 years, to be totally honest. But if we look at it from a moment, or sorry, if we look at it and take a step back for a moment, and look at some of the numbers, right? So 15 billion has been invested into blockchain and digital asset related initiatives so far this year. And that number is set to grow. There are 31 blockchain and crypto unicorns, 12 were created in the last quarter alone. And really, like for me, I think if we start to look at blockchain at various application and use case level, I think the thing that I got wrong, and I'll be the first to say this, is ultimately blockchain is an infrastructural technology. It underpins a great many things, and therefore doing something at an infrastructural level takes longer than we'd all like, than we'd all hope. And I think, Roy Amara, who is a social scientist in the US, I think what we do is we overestimate the impact of technology over a 12-month period. But then what's interesting is we tend to underestimate its impact over a 5-year or greater period. And I think that's I guess that research really stuck with me, because I think it's very true. So if we look today at some of the things that are taking place, which is accelerating the adoption of blockchain technology, albeit still quite slowly, in my opinion. We look at some of the regulations that are coming out. So there's the Markets and Crypto Assets proposal, which will be applicable across the whole of the EU. There's a distributed ledger technology pilot regime, which actually just got approved 2 days ago in the European Parliament. So that's going to result in, I guess, more activities. And our own MEP, Mairead McGuinness, was involved in that. And then I think what we're seeing is a big focus for the European Commission is around digital identity, micro credentials, or credentials being recorded using blockchain technology. So if you look at some of these use cases, they're not exactly kind of simple things. They are, I guess, public-private initiatives which have wide sweeping impacts. And I think I probably got overly enamored with the technology and how much it will change things. I think it also, another factor that I would say, which is important to note, is a lot of people are very happy with how things work today because they make money from it. And change isn't always necessarily good for them. So I think there's folks out there that probably want things to remain the same, and maybe they also look or help to slow things down a little bit.
Yeah, great, thanks. And you mentioned there digital assets. Can I ask you to explain, I suppose, what is a digital asset?
Sure. So look, it's a very intentional term, and I don't, and the bank, for example, doesn't use that term lightly, because digital assets aren't just crypto. Excuse me, it's important to know that, right? So like, absolutely, we look at crypto, we look at Bitcoin, but it's important to note that there's a whole bunch of other components or elements. So another area would be, let's say, stable coins. And what are stable coins? Stable coins are a form of crypto that is pegged on a one-to-one basis to the US dollar. So for every US dollar, you have to have it a reserve in a bank like BNY Mellon to have a stable coin worth $1. And that stable coin, let's say the most famous one is maybe Circle and Coinbase's partnership to form a stable coin called USDC. And why would you have or use USDC? A big reason for USDC, or people to use it, is that if you buy crypto, buy Bitcoin, buy Ether, and then let's say you experience a gain, you can then sell out of Bitcoin or Ether and then put it into a stable coin. And the reason people do that is to prevent going from Bitcoin and then back into cash, because you're going to pay a fee, and that fee can be pretty hefty. And that's why Coinbase is actually now worth more than BNY Mellon, right? BNY Mellon's been around for 237 years. Coinbase has been around for 8, and the market cap of Coinbase is currently 50 billion. I think BNY Mellon's might be about 48. So they're making a lot of money from those fees. Similarly, if we look at Revolut, they have a banking license application in, they can't lend. How are they making money? Primarily, it's actually through crypto. So back to stablecoin. So basically, you go from Bitcoin into a stable coin, and what you're doing is, if you experience the gain in the Bitcoin, you're basically locking in your gain in that stable coin because it's pegged to the dollar. It's not going to fluctuate wildly in price because it's linked to the dollar. And so then you can go from your stable coin back into Bitcoin or any other crypto. So you're basically staying on crypto rails. And that is one of the major benefits of stablecoins. And they have become incredibly popular, right? I think we're seeing Circle, for example, has experienced 10x growth year on year over the last 2 years. I think they have about 40 billion assets in USDC, and there's regulation is coming. They're also becoming a chartered bank in the US. So this is something that is happening, and is also happening at a regulated level. So that's stable coins. Right, next thing. Central bank digital currencies are also a big thing that we hear a lot about. So digital euro, digital dollar, digital pound. What are they? Why do they matter? Really what they are is in reaction to largely, and Sweden actually were looking at a digital krona before Facebook's announcement of Libra back in 2019. But a lot of people started taking notice of Facebook's announcement after of the creation of this kind of digital money, to which the regulators went, absolutely not. And they've had to go through various kind of rebranding exercises. But really what central bank digital currencies look to do two things. One, on the wholesale side, it's how will banks transfer money, cross-border payments or interbank transfers cheaper, better, faster than they do today. And at a retail level, what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring in more people into the financial net. From a financial inclusion perspective, they're trying to stay relevant in terms of a currency perspective at a global level and compete against tech companies and their currencies, whatever they create. And they're also trying to create ways for individual wallets. So if I'm living in, let's say, Southwest Kerry, and I have a digital wallet, and there's a big storm and my roof is blown off, the government would be able to issue direct to my digital wallet aid in relation to that event. So it would be pinpoint accuracy that aid can be provided. Now, there's the other side of that is surveillance and privacy. If there is a digital euro, it will be digital from start to finish. So if I get it and I pass it to you, to Lorraine, and it goes to everybody in this group, the government will see and have visibility of every single transaction, which makes money laundering a lot harder. But it also brings up privacy concerns. So what would I say about central bank digital currencies? I think they're going to happen, but I think it's going to be 2025, 26, really before we get to an interesting stage. And I think it will be even 26, 27 before they start coming into our lives, even at a very early stage. So there's an awful lot of considerations. It might even be 27, 28, 29 before they come into effect. So it is, for me, in crypto language, that's a long-term play. Another area are tokens, and tokens are just digital representations of anything, right? You can tokenize a pen, but why would you do that? What's the value? And that is the good question, the right question to ask. People tokenize things for various reasons. It can be that there is an expensive or illiquid asset, such as a piece of commercial real estate, which they want to tokenize and break up into smaller pieces, and therefore make that expensive asset accessible to a bigger base. Like, I can't afford a commercial piece of real estate, but I might be able to afford a portion of it. And I want to be able to buy that easily in the same way I buy stocks or crypto through Revolut. Why can't I buy tokens representing parts of assets? And that's a big feature of tokenization. So you're getting access, you're getting liquidity. Those tokens can be bought and sold without the underlying asset having to be bought or sold. And you can also program those tokens to perform in certain ways. Interest can be paid at a certain date, or you can limit the people who own them based on rules that you created to start. And then finally, an area which is, I guess, has grown massively are non-fungible tokens, which you've probably seen all over the internet or TV or whatever. And they've grown over 7,000% over the last 12 months. So the rate of growth is just undeniable. And it started with a piece of art being sold, and it was a piece of art. And actually what it was a digital representation of a piece of art. And it was sold for $69 million by an artist called Beeple. And basically, you don't own the rights, you own this specific image, because a non-fungible token means that you are the unique owner. There'll only be one token, and you are the unique owner of that, no one else. That's what it means by non-fungible. It can't be traded or exchanged for something else. There is only one of it. So it's scarcity is the big feature of these things. And why I think we're seeing a lot more about these non-fungible tokens is that, and why we will continue to do so, is that we're going to start to see these creep more and more into our lives, whether it's sport, whether it's music, whether it is gaming, for example. So to give you an example, the Kings of Leon brought out their latest album. They sold it through NFTs, more specifically through bundles of NFTs. And they used the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket model, which is always a good one. And that is that, certain people were lucky enough to win a golden ticket in these bundles of NFTs, which then enable them to go backstage, meet the band, and all that kind of good stuff. So what's happening there is you have the digital converging with the physical, and that's where we're going to see NFTs so as a unlocking mechanism to specific content, to specific experiences. And you can see the same thing happening with sport. You can see the same thing happening with gaming. So great to see Ronan Dunn, who it used to be a former, or he might be transitioning, executive with Verizon, Irish guy in the US, looking after about 25,000 people over there. He's actually now become, I think, chairman of the board of the Six Nations. So I think he's a pretty switched on guy. I'd expect to see the Six Nations roll out NFTs in 2022. So digital assets, another long-winded answer, but there's so much stuff going on. It's crypto, it's stable coins, it's CBDCs, it's tokens, it's NFTs.
Great, thanks. And just to focus on cryptocurrencies and some of the things that you mentioned, we might come back to there, the really interesting points. But in terms of cryptocurrencies, can you tell me about some of the companies that are accepting cryptocurrencies and kind of how has this, I suppose, changed over time, and how do you see it going forward? You know, will we get to the point where everybody accepts cryptocurrencies?
Good question. So how have I seen this change over time? Slowly is probably the way I'd start it. So for me, there was a big kind of a watershed moment back in September of 2020 when PayPal made an announcement that they were providing services to buy, sell, and hold crypto, and that customers could even buy goods through the PayPal platform using crypto. I remember seeing that and just went, oh my God, I need to buy more crypto. I need to buy more Bitcoin because this is going to be massive. That was just a big stepping stone into the retail market with hundreds of millions of users. So I think that was a big moment. That caused the bull run, actually, September of 2020, or literally was the catalyst for it, in my opinion. I think what we're starting to see now is certainly more institutions look at the area. If you think of Bitcoin was designed to do two things. It was meant to be a transfer of value. So how can I transfer a monetary value through specific rails without going through a bank or central bank? And it does that pretty well. But also it's a store of value. So it's meant to be a digital gold. There'll only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. And there's about 18.9 million have been created so far. The last one will be created in 2140. So there's a finite supply. Hypothetically, as time goes on, demand increases, supply decreases, price goes up, or so one could infer. So I think from a usability perspective, at the moment, I don't use crypto or any of my crypto to pay for everyday goods and services. And the reason for that is I see it as, or at least some of them anyway, as appreciating assets. So I don't want to spend €5 today that could be worth €50 tomorrow. And in fact, I actually already made that mistake a couple of years back. I went for lunch in New York and I tried to use my Bank of Ireland card. It didn't work. And then I said to this lady, by chance, do you have a digital wallet? And she said, I do. Okay, look, I'll just pay for it in Bitcoin. That lunch has now probably cost me, I don't know, like maybe $5,000, maybe more. No joke. And it was not like some fancy pants place, but just due to the increase in price of Bitcoin. But anyway, so where we are beginning to see the use of crypto more and more is actually a lot of the exchanges such as Coinbase, such as Gemini and Kraken, which is opening up in Ireland as well, is that they're creating Coinbase cards or Gemini cards. And that will enable you to actually, pay for everyday goods using your crypto. But basically it will exchange it at a certain rate, so you're not going to get absolutely annihilated in terms of the price appreciation in the following days. What they're trying to do, without getting overly complicated about it, Gemini specifically have the Gemini dollar. So in the same way I mentioned USDC is a stable coin, Gemini have their own stable coin, and what they're trying to do is get more people to use their stable coin. And so therefore they've created a debit card which is linked to their stable coin, so that you pay for goods using their card, and basically it will create more traffic, and therefore you won't be as open or exposed to any, let's say, increase in the price of Bitcoin. So $5 today will be maybe $5.01 the next day, as opposed to $10 in terms of the price of coffee that you would pay. So Look, what else do I think? I think more and more places will accept it also
Mm,
because it's valuable. I guess
mm.
look at the interest rates that exist. Um, Now, it's my personal opinion that it's valuable. I guess we're seeing markets dip pretty strongly today, and it's also still a volatile asset. So stable coins provide a mechanism to reduce that volatility.
Yeah, yeah, and we might come back to investment in cryptocurrencies because not surprisingly we have a few questions around your advice on that. But before we go to that, just there has been a good bit of talk recently about kind of cryptocurrency and the heavy use of electricity and the carbon footprint of cryptocurrency. So, can I ask you what are your thoughts around kind of sustainability of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, and another, good question. And what I would say here is, when it comes to crypto and blockchain, my, I guess, experience through getting it wrong has taught me that there's rarely one reason to any kind of movement. So there's rarely one reason to kind of points that come up, and it's really important um, to snack on multiple data sources in order to validate what you think. So just because you read it in one place, I would really encourage you to go try and read 2 or 3 other sources to see if there's truth in what's being said. Because um, I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of, I guess, confusion sometimes in relation to why things are the way they are. Getting back to the ESG question, I'm not trying to run away from it. So number one, I think what's really important is that what is the source of the energy that is being used for these Bitcoin miners? And I need to go back a second to explain Bitcoin miners. The Bitcoin blockchain specifically, back in 2009, was designed in such a way that the coins are created by the production of a mathematical puzzle, which is sent out every 10 minutes. And in reward for solving that puzzle, you get Bitcoin. And every 2 or 2.5 years, the number of Bitcoin reward is reduced in half. So at the moment it's 6.25, it'll half again in, I don't know what it is now, probably about a year and a half, and it'll go down to 3.125. And it'll continue to do that, which builds in that model of scarcity, which is the amazing thing behind it. So there is a race to solve these mathematical puzzles every 10 minutes in order to get the Bitcoin. So if you can imagine warehouses from ceiling to floor with devices that are basically whirring away, trying to solve these mathematical puzzles as fast as possible in order to get the Bitcoin, that's what's taking place. And they need lots of energy. You're looking at me on a laptop, and back in the day, 2009, you could have mined Bitcoin on your laptop very successfully. But as time has gone on, it's become much more competitive, and so you wouldn't stand a chance doing it now, right? You would not basically solve the puzzle faster than all these other machines. So the point I'm making here is, what is the source of energy for all these kind of warehouses that are whirring away trying to solve these mathematical puzzles? It was the case that in China it was smoky coal. Like, that's not good, and I have no argument against that. But what we've seen actually is that China has banned crypto and crypto mining, and that's resulted in lots of mining taking place in the US, and for example, in other parts of the world, and specifically in the US, there actually the majority of the energy that's being used for these Bitcoin miners is actually solar. So that is a positive development based on China's action, believe it or not. But so that's one, and it's solar, wind, hydroelectric, whatever. So that's number one. I think another important point that I would say, so source of energy, another important point here is, as blockchain technology has evolved over time, what we have seen is the Bitcoin blockchain uses that mechanism of proof of work, which is solving those mathematical puzzles, which is very energy intensive. New blockchains like Cardano, like Solana, and others use another mechanism which is 99% more energy efficient. So that argument about energy consumption significantly reduces. And it's great to see, I guess, the ecosystem itself kind of say, hey, you know what, this isn't good. We need to change this. And they've changed the model. So I think that's a very important point to note. Thirdly, what I would say is that there's also some companies doing pretty amazing work in the space. An Irish company called Nexalus, so Nexalus, and what they're doing is they're a team of smart folks, thermodynamic engineers. So Bitcoin miners, like the computer looking at me on now, right? They have a fan in them, and basically air is sucked in to cool the device, and that's why it pumps out hot air that sometimes you feel if you're trying to fiddle with the wires at the back. And what their, I guess, experience has told them is that air is not great at cooling, and water is a lot more efficient. So actually what they have is water cooling Bitcoin miners rather than air, because it's more efficient. So water comes in, cools the silica or the chip, and then instead of the hot water being thrown out, they go a step further and they're looking to redistribute that hot water to parts of the community, to apartments, to gyms, to schools. So they've hot water. So I really love that idea. So they're using renewable energy for Bitcoin miners, and then the byproduct that comes out is also being redistributed. So this is a really smart way of, I guess, continuing the function of the, I guess, various blockchain networks that are out there. So that's point 3. And then I think point 4, like a lot of things in life, I guess you get a little older, you start kind of thinking about things perhaps on a bigger field or other factors. And there's a great piece of study done by the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance. And what they've done is they've looked at the energy consumption of Bitcoin, right? Which is about, I think it's 101 terawatts a year of energy. Like, that's not good, right? And I'm not going to say otherwise. If you look at the energy consumption of physical gold, it's about 131 terawatts per year. Also, like, that's not good. But the important thing here is, I guess, to point out is it's more than Bitcoin. And then if we look at AC, air conditioning, right, globally, it's about 2,000 terawatts per year. If we look at the aviation industry, it's about 3,500. So if we really want to make an impact at a large scale level in terms of the environment, without being bad, there are bigger fish to fry before we hit Bitcoin. Now, I need to take individual responsibility for my actions as a citizen of the planet and try and reduce my carbon footprint as much as I can. And I guess I'm starting to. I'm by no means perfect. But I think if we're looking at the problem, we need to look at it in totality rather than focus in on one small piece of the pie, which should be addressed. But in terms of the resources that we have, I'd be looking at the other areas as well.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to hear some of those advances, and no doubt that they will continue to reduce the carbon footprint in terms of Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. In terms of cryptocurrency, can I ask you then, if somebody was interested, what is the best thing to do to kind of move into this area, or what kind of advice might you give somebody considering moving into this area that doesn't have any experience?
Good question. And I'll tell, I guess this is a tricky one, right? And I'll say from, my time in Deloitte and Consensus and also in BNY Mellon, what I would say is that is the first thing we look for, right? So I'm not going to say it's not, and it really is, because of the areas moving quickly. We're looking for folks who have direct experience that we can plug in. I think the next criteria that we look for are folks who have done their homework. So let me give you an example. I interview people and they're really well qualified individuals. So I interviewed recently a guy from Harvard, MBA, really smart guy, the kind of CV that, if you were to imagine, you'd probably put it down. And he was the guy I was interviewing. And then we started talking, and I just said, look, what do you think about the crypto market? What do you think about digital assets? What are the big themes? And really what was clear to me is that it was, for want of a better term, it was a bit of a bandwagon item. So I think it's become popular over the last, 12 months maybe, and a lot of people are interested in getting into it, but they haven't done their homework to really demonstrate that. So how can you, like, a lot of people are interested in crypto. Show me, prove it to me. How, like, what have you done to demonstrate that you've gone above and beyond to say, you know what, I want to make this my career? And so to give examples, I think, of where people have demonstrated that is they may have done a course specifically in it. So I know there's courses, let's say I think there's an online program in MIT. There's one with Oxford. There's a bunch of different programs that you can do all around the world, and they're online. And some of them cost more money than others. And I appreciate people are already studying on this call, especially. But look, that is a way, I think, to demonstrate that you're serious. Secondly, I think for people to publish articles. So I was interviewing a lady recently, and she's actually just written some really good articles about decentralized finance, and about other aspects of the digital asset ecosystem. So for me, that demonstrates that she has taken time to understand, she's taken time to analyze, and then she's, in the same way you write any paper, then she's, written that all down, and she's kind of put forward her views or recommendations, as the case may be. So that for me is somebody who's got off their butt and actually kind of put their money where their mouth is, in terms of saying, you know what, I am interested and I do want to get into this. So for me, they are really important things. If you can do a course, if you can write an article, and if you can fundamentally demonstrate that you have invested time, and that this isn't a passing interest, and that you kind of want to be part of the next wave without putting in the work, then I think, certainly you'll get an interview, or you'll get through from the first round to the second round. Certainly, I'll put forward that I'm more than happy to kind of talk with people and have a virtual coffee in terms of providing advice as best I can. From an employment perspective in Ireland, the good news is that now has never been a better time to try and get a job in digital assets and blockchain. So as we look at the companies that have moved here, so Coinbase now nearly have 300 people working here. Kraken is in the process of being set up. Crypto.com, which is being led by an old friend of mine, Cormac Dinan, they're looking to grow. Similarly with Gemini, Binance have announced that they're setting up here. I guess Revolut is another company. So there are a bunch of companies, and I think when people are looking to change careers, I think the thing, and look, I've kind of been there a couple of times, I guess. I think you may need to take a step back to go forward if you're really passionate about this area and feel that's the case, and just say, you know what, I'm all in on this, and I'm willing to do what it takes to get experience so I can get my foot in the door. So hopefully that gives you, I guess, some thoughts.
Yeah, and I suppose could I just ask you, just still on that point, where would you see to be the main kind of job opportunities, or what kind of profile, are companies looking for? I suppose regulation is a big area.
Definitely. So look, I think that, areas where there's huge demand across all these companies, I think would be compliance, legal, and then I think you're looking at engineers or engineering. I think there are also opportunities though for business folks. So especially on the customer success side. So what do I mean by customer success? Because that can mean different things to different people. Customer success basically means that there's a sales team. They will kind of, they'll have a pipeline. It'll be their job to get a client to sign a contract for X, Y, Z. The customer success team, it's their job to ensure the customer is, I guess, fully onboarded. That you hit your kind of key performance indicators as to they're using the platform, that they're repeat users, they're using it multiple times, ideally per day or per week or per month, and that you are there to, I guess, play an advanced account management role for that person. And I think there's jobs, and there will be more and more of those jobs in Coinbase, in Kraken, and all those other companies that I mentioned. Uphold is another one that's coming to Ireland as well. So I think if you are really passionate about getting this area, I do think there will be opportunities.
Great. And can I just ask another piece of advice around opportunities, and that would be around kind of making an investment in cryptocurrencies. And, would you kind of recommend people, do you think that there is still value in purchasing Bitcoins? Obviously, they can fluctuate, and that's the downside, like any investment.
Sure. Look, I'm not in a position to give financial advice or recommendations on any crypto or any other asset, for that is, or asset class beyond crypto. I think what's important here to note are probably a few things. So number one is try and understand what the blockchain protocol underneath it, or what the token or what the coin is trying to do. Like, what's its purpose? If things are too good to be true, they usually are. And I think that's certainly another lesson I've learned. So try and understand what is the purpose of it. And if you don't understand, I would say mark that as very high risk. And then it comes down to your appetite to risk for your crypto portfolio. So that would be kind of, I guess, an important thing to think about. I think what I would say as well is like any portfolio, I think a balanced portfolio is very important. And depending on your appetite to risk, the way I kind of look at it is, you know what, I would be saying if 50% of your portfolio should be maybe could be Bitcoin, 30% Ether, and then maybe 20% some other coins. But ultimately, the whole asset class is very volatile, right? If you look at the percentage of risk associated with equities, which would be deemed higher risk, right, as a financial advisor, so they probably have about a 15% equity at risk percentage. The risk of crypto is at around above 80%. So to be in the crypto game, I think what's really important is know the risks and know that it could go to zero. And I would also suggest that really, look at it as part of your overall portfolio in relation to your pension, real estate, and cash, bonds, all that good stuff, and make it a small proportion rather than anything else. So, betting the house, you could win big, you could lose it all. I also think you've got to be willing to ride out the highs and lows based on the market. So we're seeing just Bitcoin, hit $54,000 today. It was $67,000 maybe 10 days ago. So there are significant movements in the market, which are not like any other, right? FX, that market's pretty volatile. It is nothing on crypto. So I think to recap what I say is, number one, what is your overall strategy with crypto? Like, what's your target? If you buy at X, have a selling point that it goes up to that, I'm going to sell out, or at least sell some of it. Use it as a diversification mechanism, but understand your appetite to risk. They would be the factors that I would consider, as well as trying to understand a little bit more about the underlying technology or the protocol or the companies and the people that are involved, like you would any other investment.
Okay, great. So I'll just take a question here from the chat. Conscious of time, but there are a couple in here. So one, we have, just going back to blockchain. Blockchain takes away the leverage that countries, banks, and other intermediaries have due to its decentralization. Worldwide, we have seen a growth in nationalism, which I suppose completely conflicts with blockchain. How do you think this will play out in the future? Will countries like America, Russia, and China accept digital money and use blockchain?
Okay. If we look at why Bitcoin was created in the first place, it was to get around exactly those principles. Bitcoin doesn't know borders. And the reason why it was designed was to get around that. So that is the ethos behind Bitcoin specifically, and many other blockchains, by the way. So if a country tries to ban it, I think there'll just be other versions that come up and are formed, and those countries will have to try and deal with that. Like, if we look, China has banned everything to do with crypto. Ironically, they haven't banned their own central bank digital currency, and commentators are writing that the reason why they haven't banned their own cryptocurrency is because they banned everything else so that people would actually adopt the national digital yuan, which I think is a pretty interesting insight. But anyway, back to this. So one, very hard to kind of ban things outright like that because they'll just pop up somewhere else. Two, they haven't been banned to date because governments around the world see benefits in the underlying technology. And this is the challenge that regulators have, which is they're trying to balance innovation with stability and protecting consumers. And that's why blockchain and Bitcoin hasn't been banned, because they see benefit in it. They even may end up using it in some way. So I think that is a very subtle but important point. So maybe, yeah, there's some thoughts in relation to that. Look, constantly evolving from a regulatory perspective, but the good thing is, and within the Bitcoin and blockchain space more broadly, is that regulation, despite what people may think, regulation is welcome. It provides rules of the road, which helps people operate within those rules of the road. So from a banking perspective, where it's impossible to operate, where there are no rules, makes it incredibly complex to operate, and it's too risky. And so especially regulated entities, they just simply go, if there are no rules, we're not participating. We don't go near it. So rules are actually really good. It'll increase adoption.
Great. And another question here from chat, again around blockchain. How does it deal with the right to be forgotten across different legal areas?
Good question, and that is something the European Commission is working through. Yeah, so GDPR and the right to be forgotten, that is something that's being worked through. I don't have a better answer than that. I think it's a good point. It's a challenge. One of the areas that's being looked at is that effectively the information that will be recorded on a blockchain may be the case that the keys that have access to that information will effectively be destroyed. So the data would stay, but the access points would be burned or would disappear. So that would be a mechanism for the access to that information to be, I guess, to be eliminated and gone forever. So data remains, access is gone. And that's something that I know is being looked at.
Okay, very interesting. A question here then. Mark Zuckerberg mentioned NFTs twice during the recent conference announcing Meta's plans for the metaverse. Do you see blockchain growing as a critical infrastructure for metaverse and for NFTs?
Hopefully. I think it's pretty exciting. I don't know, right? It would be the short answer. I think there's kind of crazy stuff going on since that announcement, and Decentraland and Sand and all these kind of people buying virtual properties and stuff like that. Truthfully, on my side, I actually haven't had enough time to dig into it to really, I guess, provide any meaningful thoughts. I would argue that it's probably early days, which probably means that there's wild opportunities, but also wild risk. And so I would be, I think I probably need some time to look into it. To go back to NFTs specifically, I think we're at the early days of NFTs. I think they're going to be around and we're at the early days, and we're going to start using them. We may even not know that we're totally using them when we are. So I think as I said, if you're at a sporting event to unlock specific content, a podcast, an interview, you may need to purchase an NFT to give you that. So that will be that on-ramp to provide access to that new content. I think we're only at the start of seeing how that world works, because if you think about it today, the digital and the physical experiences, they're not fully there. And I think there's going to be a big meshing, and I think NFTs will play a very important role in that.
Great. So maybe just one final question, and it was around SMEs. And I suppose from your own experience, I suppose sometimes when we hear about companies and blockchains and embracing emerging technologies, they're often large organizations. Are SMEs kind of adopting blockchain? I suppose probably through supply chains, but is there more opportunity maybe for SMEs?
What would I say here? What is the unique value that blockchain is bringing in that scenario? How is it different to what happens today? And if there is merit in that, then it will become a new standard, but standards take time. So I'd argue that I think standards using blockchain are forming. I don't think they're there yet. I think it's probably an expensive business for an SME to try and create that standard, as opposed to what happens today. So for me, I would be thinking, as a business, as an SME, what do I do? What's our strategy? What do our customers want? How best do I achieve those things? And what's the best technology to do that? And if that is blockchain and smart contracts and all that good stuff, great, go after it and build those products to, delight your customers. But I would be evaluating other technologies to achieve those goals as well.
Great. And we're just coming up on time. So I'd just like to thank you again, Lory, for your time. That was a really interesting discussion. You gave us great insight into blockchains and digital assets. So thanks again. And just to mention briefly again to the participants, we are on week 3 of our 6-week seminar series on emerging technologies. So we hope that you join us for the next 3 weeks, and next week we'll be discussing artificial intelligence with Alessandra Sala and David Kerrigan. So do come along and join us if you can. So once again, Lory, thanks.
Pleasure, thank you.